Welcome to Cedar Hill Prep School Back to School Night. I'll be presenting a few slides to help you understand the educational system, highlighting some facts that I hope will make you think, ponder, reflect, and plan your child's education. To begin with, I'd like to talk about education in the United States and public education. Public education was also called mass schooling, and its inception can be traced to the need for social conformity to fill the labor pool of the state and nation. The goal was to make sure we schooled our children so that they could know and they could acquire basic facts. They could be trained to have basic job skills and understand the cultural norms and values to promote national unity. Now, education is actually just one aspect of public schooling. As schools grew larger, it became important to administer them, and that resulted in systems like standardization, building routines, formal operating and administrative procedures. Now, the whole purpose of this slide is for you to think, is there a match between your goals and the social conformity goals? Do you believe that the goal of education is to build one's knowledge base? It's a journey of discovery, hard work, and perseverance. Then I'd like you to really study history, understand the educational system so that you can derive the most benefits from it. During my research for a presentation that I had to do elsewhere, I found a very interesting slide, which actually shook my foundation because I genuinely believed United States was very education-centric. This came as a surprise that the United States actually was one of the nations that prioritized a good education the least. It's just something to think about and put it in perspective as you continue your journey with your child. Now let's look at current society, where we live now. It's a very diverse society. What do we see? We see diversity in parent characteristics. We see diversity within communities. We see diversity in the socioeconomic status, and we also see prevalent differences in skill sets and exposure among all the students. And to top it all, we notice that cultures tend to stick together. We see evidence of segregated living, and there's a lack of cultural intermingling. And now let's look at the other side of the coin of our current societal demographics and public schools. The current educational system is built on a one-size-fits-all model. It was designed in the early 1900s based on the goals of the Industrial Revolution. Now I want you to think, do you think the current educational system is supporting your needs, your vision for your child, and your goals for your child? Now let's get one step deeper into the framework of the current educational system. So let's look at early childhood education. You find early childhood education in the form of daycares where there's babysitting. Then there are daycares which have a curriculum focused on social skills, basic pre-reading skills, and then you have some that are focused on whole child development, and then there are schools that are based on philosophies. Now, I also want you to think about and look deeper into the skill sets of many of these early childhood education centers. Are the teachers specialized in early childhood education? Is it mostly curriculum driven, where you believe that the skill sets of the disseminator of curriculum is not so important? Or better yet, is it all about social skills, which are extremely important too? But the early experiences of a child are critical in preparing them for kindergarten and up. So that's something that I would like everyone to think about. Now let's look at mainstream education. Within a public school, there are different classifications for learners. Majority of the students would be in mainstream classrooms, and then based on a home survey, if you signed or if you mentioned that your child is exposed to another language, then based on your home survey, the school can decide to put them in an ESL classroom, and every state, every county, every district has their various permutations and combinations of how ESL education is disseminated. And then you have students who are classified as needing special education, and that would be the special needs category. Now, these three learner classifications exist in the elementary school, middle school, and high school. But what you need to see is how quickly are students mainstreamed if they are classified as an ESL or special needs, and when they are mainstreamed, do they have the skill sets to succeed, or do they feel that they weren't well prepared to get to be in mainstream classrooms? These are very important questions one has to ask. And remember, eventually the goal of the high school is to make sure they get a high school diploma and to get into a college, any college. And it's very important for you as a parent to make sure that your goals and the school's goals for your child are the same. In this slide, I show a broken Jenga. The analogy is that when it's broken in the foundation, the whole Jenga topples. Similarly, one needs to look at education also as building one's skills. The early foundation for learning is very important. It's also important to understand that the mental development and the physical development of a child are correlated. So the first skills that a child actually learns are sensory motor. And slowly as they get to the preschool age, they get to do pre-operational skills, grouping things. They actually see patterns, and they build on their sensory motor, where they build their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills. And as they proceed further into elementary school, they start learning concrete concepts. This is when they learn reading, writing, arithmetic. And then as they pursue education into middle and high school, their abstract thinking is developed. They become critical thinkers and problem solvers. Now, many times parents, when they see their little child show a lot of enthusiasm to learn, they assume that they are actually also able to understand things in concrete and abstract forms. But neuroscience has clearly shown that your mental development is correlated to your physical development. So while they may sometimes in kindergarten or grade 1 or grade 2 do double-digit addition, that can be correlated to these children seeing them as patterns and not understanding it in terms of concrete concepts. However, one also needs to be extremely mindful that it is important to introduce skills that are correlated to their physical development so that they keep pace with their physical development. We teach to create synchrony. With this slide, I want people to ponder over this. Excerpts are from Vanessa Rodriguez of Harvard School of Education. Brain development shows teaching is an adaptive skill. It is to participate in a specific task within our context. It's not about test taking. A parent teaches a child how to walk because it's necessary to become part of our society, not because we must walk upright to survive. We teach reading and writing, not because we cannot communicate without it, but because it allows us to become part of one another's context. So another observation was that 2-year-olds were unable to teach skills to one another, but a 3.5-year-old was able to teach their untrained peer a task they had mastered. In elementary school, children teach by patterns and showing, while in middle and high school, they're able to articulate, use description, collaborate, while engaging in teaching. And it is important to know that teaching and learning actually engage in similar skills and similar activities, and they have a chronological pattern. The CHP educational model resonates with the brain-targeted teaching model of Dr. Mariel Hardiman of Johns Hopkins University. Now, there have been various teaching models that have existed over time. Today, thanks to technology and more imaging techniques, we are able to actually teach or build teaching models that are correlated to cognitive development. Teaching, and with the concept of the empty vessel model, where the student is considered an empty vessel, usually involves a teacher in the transmission-based model of teaching and learning. So what they do is they instruct with the assumption that the child is just receiving the information and is not thinking about it. In fact, learning from a computer, iPad, television, they're all considered merely exporting the information to the learner. The transformative model of teaching is aligned to the cognitive development of the brain. Here, the teacher and the student both learn by interaction. The student's learning mind-brain develops uniquely, and it's affected by their personal context. What that means is that it's important that they are in an environment that fosters learning, and the kind of school, the kind of interactions, and the quality of interactions with their parents and peers have a big influence in their learning. How many of you understand the connection between executive function skills and learning? They are focus and paying attention. What does that do? It fosters listening skills, observation skills, making connections, and fosters innovation and creativity. Self-regulation, the ability to control one's impulses. It really helps you become a better problem solver. Also, it helps you pause, ponder, and do pros and cons and make the right decisions. Organization skills. The more organized you are, the more you can do and the more efficient you can be. And goal setting. It's very important to have a vision for one's life. And this can be fostered from very young. And then a very important skill, to be independent or to be dependent. Many parents genuinely believe their children do not have the capabilities of being independent. So they enable them. And this is prevalent in early childhood. But you should be able to see a lot of YouTube videos when you can notice little infants trying to figure out things, trying to crawl their way into spaces they shouldn't be, trying to toddle their way into places where we wouldn't want them to be. And it's clearly evident from empirical research that parents who foster independence, who allow little children to take risks within a safety net, who allow children to learn by experimentation, make mistakes, they foster independent learning, and these children are ahead of the curve in many of their skill sets. Ellen Galensky, in her book, Mind in the Making. Now, this is a book that one recommends every parent to read to help them understand child development. She says there are 7 essential life skills: focus and self-control, perspective taking, communicating, making connections, critical thinking, taking on challenges, and self-directed engaged learning. She actually gives one examples of how you can see evidence of these 7 skills in children at all ages. She talks about how you can foster it. And she also talks about how some of these actually interact with each other, and it's important for the larger goals of life. Now let's look at education from another angle. What is the difference in learning outcomes and as a function of the kind of school one goes to? You must understand that public schools are dependent on funding from the local district, the tax monies from the residential taxes, from grants, from federal funding, and all this determines how you can use that money to provide equitable education to everybody in the public school system. So the goal is to service the needs of every student, which is a very daunting task. The proficiency level, therefore, has to be a tangible level. So currently, the proficiency level deemed by public education is that every student should exhibit proficiency in reading and math, which is attaining 50% out of 100 to 53 out of 500. Now, for a student to exhibit mastery, which is getting an A or a B, you have to be careful on how you interpret the A or the B. If the proficiency level is 50% and that is considered proficiency, then getting 49% can get you an A. Now, an A when you're fostering mastery is getting 90% out of 100. How many of you know what the scale is at the school your child is attending? And many times in towns, depending on which demographic bracket the town is classified under, the mastery goals are also a function of how parents enable the process of learning. Parental involvement, parental knowledge, parental resources, supplementary enrichment, and parental understanding of the difference between skill development and building knowledge. Skill development is about basic skills, the foundation, everything that you can attain by rote or by simplifying the question and answer process and with multiple choice. But to build knowledge, to infer, to synthesize and critically think, you need to interact with a parent educator, a teacher educator, with better peers, and in environments where critical thinking and problem solving are fostered. In private schools, first, people go there by choice. And 9 out of 10 times, the parents who join private schools, they all seem to have the same value system. They all want specific goals for their child. And most private schools have their students take cognitive ability tests where you actually see where your child is in their cognitive development continuum. For example, at Cedar Hill Prep, we use the Terranova Cognitive Ability Test. It's also the multiple assessment test. And it has line items on every aspect of cognition, understanding, analysis, synthesis. So it's very easy for the parent and the teacher to understand how to build the skill sets of these students. Now, this mastery or the quest for mastery in a private school is enhanced by their peer group, by the rigor of the curriculum and the whole child development. And you must remember, in life, everything is governed by the 80-20 rule. 20% of the population takes the effort to understand the system, analyze what they're getting for their money's worth, and 80% of the people are scared to be different. They prefer to conform. They'd rather somebody else make the decision for them. They'd rather just go by what somebody else said. But in the end, it is your child. You need to know more to help your child learn more. And finally, the final slide. This is an extremely important matter in today's world. Parents are overworked, stressed, overextended, and they fear for their future and their child's future. Fear and anxiety affect the brain architecture of learning and memory. And guess what? Stress at any age kills human potential. Cortisol kills the cognitive abilities of the brain. So it's extremely important for the adults to make sure that they maintain or manage their stress and well-being. And they also manage to not share the stress with their children. They also need to be cognizant of not giving stress to their children, because children cannot handle stress as well as adults do. And this manifests itself in many ways. And the end goal of every parent is to have a well-adjusted, happy child. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.